Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Movies and Tea. Here we are once again taking a break from our usual broadcasting format to bring you a review of a film which has just been released, but at the same time we felt very inclined to talk about, and that is the 2020 documentary You Cannot Kill David Arquette, about David Arquette and his foray into the exciting world of professional wrestling. Now, for those of you not in the know, or who perhaps don't really care about the exciting world of professional wrestling, 20 years ago, on April 26th edition of WCW Thunder, David Arquette, who was on a promotional tour for the Ready to Rumble wrestling comedy, which at the same time featured many of WCW's most memorable faces, was bestowed the top title in the company, in this case the WCW Heavyweight Championship. Now, this had been the brainchild of the head writer Vince Russo, who's essentially a whole other villain in the wrestling community. And he basically saw the belt as a prop and as a way to get the company more mainstream press. However, to the fans and the wrestlers especially, they saw it is very much a big disrespect to the title and what it meant, and especially those who had fought to earn the right to hold it. So for it to suddenly be bestowed on a non-wrestler like David Arquette, who himself is a lifelong fan of wrestling, has meant that it's been this sort of shame that's been going on to site. It has been one of the worst moments in the history of professional wrestling. And this in itself is really where we join the story, as 20 years later David Arquette is basically trying to remove that shame that is sort of carried with him and try and make things up in many ways to the fans by setting out on a quest to become a legitimate professional wrestler. Now, Kim, I mean, I don't know if you knew about this story before the documentary came out. I mean, for myself, it's something I heard of, heard that David Arquette was actually trying to be a professional wrestler, and in particular, I'd heard about his brush with death during a death match, which we do see in the film itself. But I mean, had you heard anything about this story before the documentary came out?
No, I know nothing about wrestling. I mean, I might have seen some random matches when I used to have TV when I was really young. Actual TV channels. I own a TV. I don't like not have a TV. I just don't have TV channels right now.
No, you're hip and just like stream things nowadays rather than wait for exactly. TV to come to you.
Exactly. If you want to put it that way. But yeah, no, I mean, that's about the extent of wrestling that I know. And then, some certain things that I hear, like certain wrestler names or something might cross me once in a while. But in general, I really don't know much about it.
Okay.
So, I mean, I never knew, and I never watched Ready to Rumble. So this was a completely new thing to me. If you don't talk about it, I don't really sometimes I forget that David Arquette hasn't been in a lot of bigger movies in the recent years. So I think that's why it piqued my interest, in the sense that, the title is pretty catchy. You cannot kill David Arquette. Well, what does that all mean, right? And then you listen to, I read a little bit of the description, and it seemed pretty interesting, to say the least, right?
Yeah, I mean, this obviously, your sort of lack of interest in professional wrestling sort of flying in the face of my absolute love and admiration of professional wrestling, as professional wrestling is like one of my great loves in life. It has been, I would say, since around 99 when I really got into sort of watching professional wrestling, and I've sort of gone back and forth between different federations. I watched some WWE, I was a big TNA fan for a while, and currently I'm a huge AEW fan. So did sort of come through the sort of wire that of David Arquette obviously wrestling, and I thought, well, that's a really interesting story. I would like to see more about this story, and it just so happened that this documentary has come out, and I had no idea that they were even filming a documentary following his journey as a professional wrestler, and I'm all the more glad that he decided to take a film crew on this journey with him, because the film takes place over the course of 2 years. And we joined David Arquette basically at his lowest point ever, as he's not been able to get any sort of major sort of acting work in 10 years. Hollywood has pretty much dismissed him as being this absolute sort of goofball. While he obviously has this lovely mansion house, he's got a beautiful wife who gets on with his ex-beautiful wife, Courtney Cox, and he's basically making ends meet by being more of an executive producer, but at the same time, behind the scenes, he's really sort of struggling with life as general. I mean, he's a functioning alcoholic, he's suffered a heart attack, and he just basically is trying to find something to give himself some sort of purpose in life again, and he sort of sets out believing that professional wrestling is going to be it. And initially he goes to like a fan convention and he thinks, oh, he's just going to sort of wander into the wrestling world and be like instantly accepted. And what essentially happens is that he gets, first of all, beaten up by a promoter, one half of the Nasty Boys who now runs Legends of Wrestling. He goes to a wrestling convention and nobody turns up to his booth, and he goes to take part in what he assumes is going to be a legitimate wrestling federation, but it's basically just some guy's backyard federation, and ends up having the Seven Shades beaten out of him by these wrestling fans. So it's not the best start he sets off on.
I really like the fact that he did this also because of just the hardships, right? Because he's starting from the bottom, and it shows kind of like there's really no shortcut to anything. He might have won the title before, but because of all the disrespect that both wrestlers and fans felt about it, these people that he's encountering have zero respect for him. And that's probably why it was even harder for him to get into the business. But I think that a lot of the respect came in the sense that he started taking on this challenge, despite the fact that he probably shouldn't because his doctor told him not to.
Oh, yeah.
But it was something that I think was something he needed to do. And I think everybody has those moments in life where you did something and you feel like you kind of need to justify yourself a little. Show your respect to what he loves, type of thing. Like, show his respect for what he loves. And in this sense, the journey itself, right from, obviously the start is very brutal to watch him from, his low point and going to these things and all these random people that he encounters and constantly getting beat up. And you watch him go through this beginning and you can't help but feel a little sad for him. I don't know. I'm coming off of some kind of like unjust treatment kind of thing to celebrities right now that I've been dealing with for a while because of a Chinese celebrity that's been, I think, wrongly treated.
Okay.
So I'm coming into this with a lot of like already like bad feelings about, like how people kind of, I think, there's a lot of things that I feel wasn't his doing. A lot of times when you do promotional runs for whatever movie or whatever, I don't think he has all the say, right? And whoever made the decision to make him win the title had a lot to blame with the fact that he's in this situation, right? Where his life kind of can't seem to hit that high point again that he had.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre as well, the fact that, everyone's they're saying, David Arquette winning the WCW title is like the low point of wrestling history, and yet a few months down the line, Vince Russo, like the head writer for WCW, is winning the title, and people seem to have forgotten about these things. But I think at that point, the company was pretty much in its death throes anyway. So, but yeah, as you said, when we see him, because in his size, basically because he did Scream and he played opposite Dewey, and he's sort of like this lovable goofball that Hollywood basically typecast him as being this goofball sort of character rather than this young sort of up and comer that he was prior to that. And it's kind of, as you said, it's kind of sad when you see him now. He's overweight. He's basically a functional alcoholic, and you see him doing this photo shoot. Which is probably one of the most saddest things I've ever seen. And it's all set to Elkie Brooks in No Mother Fool, and you see him there, and he's like trying to do this like photo shoot where he's remarks himself as David Magic Man Arquette, and he's visibly overweight. He's basically got no justification to ever be anywhere near a wrestling ring again, yet alone thinking that he could sort of set out on this path to becoming a wrestler. But you gotta, as I said, you really gotta give him credit. I mean, he starts at the bottom like anyone else. He has no sort of shortcuts. I mean, he obviously has name value to him. So, but he's basically realizes, you know, if he's gonna be a wrestler, he's gonna go out, he's gonna get trained. So he joins a wrestling school. He goes to Mexico and trains with luchadors, and even embarks on like street wrestling, which is like luchador version of sort of street hustling, where they set up like wrestling matches at traffic light stops to get money from the drivers sort of queued up. And I have to say, just seeing his progression, because it's not like it comes easy to him. He has to like fight every inch of the way to sort of like get through his training and sort of get himself into stage. And I think that in many ways it kind of sort of skips over some of the training bits. So he sort of like goes down to Mexico, and then suddenly he's like comes back and he's like ripped, and he's like this amazing wrestler, which is an interesting time skip to say the least.
One of the biggest issues with sometimes documentaries is, especially if it spans over a long time, I think we talked about that a lot in Clapboard Jungle when we reviewed it before, is really the pacing of how we're seeing this. And with this one, what I really liked was the fact that there was these huge jumps, but the point of it, I think, wasn't the fact that he was getting ripped, wasn't the fact that he was, you know, getting into all of, just the little details. I think it was more the fact that the big events he was getting ready for, there was a lot of hard work behind it, and you can see these changes, because if we saw it like every step of the way, we might not have noticed those changes as much. But at the same time, you know, like I really like the street fighting part, and I really like the whole aspect of how every step of the way, to me, at least because to me, it's something special. Like, it's something different, right? I don't know anything about wrestling. So how you get into wrestling and the details of wrestling, and even the fact that the wrestling is actually a show that's put up. I never knew that before. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, all this is like fresh stuff for me. Like, I never knew any of these things. And, you know, obviously before we started this, the husband didn't bother to fill me in on the details. So when I made comments like that, he was like, "You didn't know that?" And I was like, "Uh-huh, yeah, okay, sure."
Yeah, I love the fact that he acts like the expert there, yet he still messages myself. It's just like, were people really that upset about him winning the WCW title? And
well, I mean, he knows what, like, he knows that wrestling is. Yeah. As a core, like, pretty much it's like a set show. Like, certain movements are done, but everything in between is the real deal. Like, your whatever is happening in between is going on there. It is, you know, solid moves, and, you know, these people are actually doing those things, and whatever, right?
I mean, yeah, wrestling is a predetermined contest, so it's basically what you're watching is basically ballet, but just really violent ballet, and the concept is essentially the same, you know, strong guys in spandex leaping around the place and working with each other to put on a performance. And I think this is what I think the film does really well. It shows the wrestling world the utmost respect that it deserves, much like Mickey Rourke's The Wrestler, which is very easy to compare this film to, as you're essentially watching another broke down piece of meat fighting for his shot at the wrestling dream. Whereas obviously with Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler, he was obviously like this 80s wrestler who'd had his sort of high spot and is now basically looking for that spot again. David Arquette is essentially trying to find redemption in wrestling, and he says himself that he gets over his alcoholism because through wrestling it makes life interesting. It gives him something to be excited about, which is just a really fascinating recovery, really, to say the man who is self-admittedly a functioning alcoholic, and yet once he starts in his training that he gives up drinking. He's just so focused on wrestling and training, and this is what keeps his mind busy. So it's just really fascinating to see someone's recovery. And I would want to put it alongside the likes of the resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts, which is another great documentary about Diamond Dallas Page, who we also see acting as a mentor to Arquette here, who basically took in Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall, two of wrestling's greatest lost causes. People basically had written them off as being on death's door and just waiting for them to keel over at any moment, and yet through his yoga program, they managed to really sort of get themselves clean and get themselves back into fighting form. And it's always fun. I was just love the fact that, as I said, this film just starts right at the bottom. So you have guys who are just like in wrestling in their backyard. I mean, this ring is so shockingly bad it breaks partway through their match. And they're sort of like, oh yeah, we should have really put that bolt in. It's like. And the guy who like constructs the ring is like, oh, I had nothing to do with this because I was in prison at the time when we built this.
I mean, the backyard match is definitely one of, the highlights, because it's surprising that he goes to somewhere. He doesn't expect that this is where he's going to be going to. But I mean, going back to like a final thought and kind of like the Mexico where he had to do the street wrestling. I think one of those really great moments is the fact that this scene is especially important because he's fighting to be able to get his, I think it's to get the luchador mask, right?
Yes.
And he's fighting for just to be respected. So you have to show that you're able to be entertaining and be able to kind of have have convincing skills that you're doing this stuff and really just be out there, right? And for him, when the fact that when he gets the mask and he achieves it, it's kind of like this victory because it's kind of like the first step in the right direction. Finally, he's like something in the wrestling community now.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to luchadors, the mask that they wear, that is like the utmost sort of like level. I mean, they won't ever take their masks off. So you'll see them and they're like, when they're doing like promotion and they're going from venues and stuff, they'll always be wearing their masks. So you see them like in like 3-piece suits and they're still wearing luchador masks. Because your mask is who you are, and it's the utmost way to disrespect your opponent is to remove their mask. So you have like competitions where you put your mask on the line, and if you're unmasked as a luchador wrestler, it's like seen as the ultimate shame that you can have, because down in Mexico wrestling is like a religion. In different parts of the world it's viewed in different sort of ways. I mean, in Japan it's viewed as like a sport. Canada, it's an absolute legacy. Over in Canada, you've obviously got Stu Hart's wrestling dungeon, which is given the likes of like the Hart Foundation. You've got people like Bret the Hitman Hart, you got Chris Jericho, you got Lance Storm. It just goes on and on and on, like the number of legendary wrestlers that came out of Canada. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the weather or something. People wrestle to keep warm up there or something. I don't know. So I love the fact that they tap into all these little subcultures of wrestling. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to be a wrestler, I'm going to go and get trained, and then I'm straight in having a shop with like one of the big companies. It's like, no, he sets himself out, and he basically, as the backyard wrestler guy says, he's like, I had just basically the perfect indie experience. A shitty promoter, no money, and no audience to watch you get the shit beaten out of you for like little reward. And if you still want to do it, then you know you're gonna continue on this journey. So to see him actually legitimately become a wrestler is just such a fascinating journey. Even if you're not a wrestling fan, I think you would still get a lot out of this film. It's not set up as a film for wrestling fans. It's a film set up basically for people who are interested in this journey. So if you like wrestling, you'll be able to get a lot out of it, because you see not only the respect it treats the industry, but also a lot of familiar faces. I mean, you have like Ric Flair, who again is one of those things that I would love to try and explain to people who don't like wrestling why Ric Flair's important till we see it at the start of this documentary. And as I say, it's just a really sort of fascinating journey that you're going on here. And I think the story itself is edited so tight, it's just gripping throughout. I was just absolutely hooked on this documentary throughout.
I think one of the main things of choosing this was really to see whether it was something that I would be able to accept. Because, honestly, I'm really not a wrestling fan. Like,
no.
It's not just it's not just like, I don't know it, so I don't, I've never had an interest in it.
Yeah.
It's the fact that I remembered, like, my random memory of it as a child. It's not something that I'm behind. Like, it's very tough. Like, it's something tough to watch. It's not something I like to watch.
Yeah.
It's not entertaining for me. But, I think that, we talk about this starting, and the documentary starts with, I think it's Mr. Anderson. I think that's
yes.
his name. I don't remember his name right now.
Yeah,
so you see Mr. Anderson just getting really, it's like, starts off right away, super intense. He's throwing things around, and he's super angry about this whole Arquette winning the title, and he's, and it's like super over the top and angry, and it just catches you right away. And, right away you see the whole situation, and that's such a strong start. It just kind of grabs you right away. You might not know who this guy is, but obviously there's a lot of hatred going on. But what's really funny is, I don't know if you watched through the whole credits or anything.
Oh, yeah.
when But because at the end, there's like something like David Arquette shows up and talks again, right? And during the thing, we have the whole like kind of like bloopers of them with doing the Anderson thing, and then there's like a part where like I think his weights drop or something like that. It's really
oh yeah, he loses his grip on the weights, and they're basically trying to get like pumped up and angry and stuff. He's like, okay, there's no reason for this ring. He's like lose grip on his ring, so he has to like break character and stuff. So.
I just find it so funny because it's so, when you look at the bloopers of it like that, it's so in character that these are essentially actors. Wrestling is essentially full of actors. They're just over the top actors, and they're all big, strong guys tackling each other with an agenda.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's a predetermined contest. But I mean, this is the thing with wrestling. I mean, there's probably you're never going to be able to fully explain why wrestling has its appeal to non-wrestling fans. But to wrestling fans, you don't really need to justify why it makes sense. It just does. It's just something that we just love and adore. It has this sort of like legacy and this idea that you follow these characters and they build up like legacies and histories as they go from company to company, and you buy into the rivalries that that these two guys really hate each other and that they got this grudge to settle, and the only way they can do it is by getting in a ring and wrestling each other and under some stipulation or another. And yet at the same time, at the back of your mind, they're all going home on the same tour bus, that they go backstage and everyone's friends again. It's just all a big it's all a performance. And this is, I mean, you can watch there's the famous documentary Beyond the Mat, which basically was the first documentary to show the inner workings of how wrestling does. And again, with this documentary, it does the same as we see him when he has his first sort of real professional wrestling match with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And the match is actually broken down through these backstage conversations, and Arquette like talking with his opponents. It's all like, oh, I'm going to come out, I'm going to do this, and you see it cut to the match and him going through the same motions they're talking about. And I think that was just such a perfect way to break down how they figure out what they're going to do in a match. I think it just perfectly broke down how they do what they do, and I think it was just really interesting to see. And much like the fact that when you see the other end of the scale, when you see like, oh, well, this is a death match, and this is how this differs from like the wrestling we've seen before, where basically with deathmatch wrestling, it's slow, like anything goes. You can use light tubes, you can use weapons, and the actual match, Arquette went into it thinking it was a hardcore match, which is basically the step down from a death match where you can still use weapons and stuff, but it didn't go to the same extremes. No one's getting like carved open with light tubes and like busted open with barbed wire and fire and tables and broken glass and pretty much any other thing. I mean, in there was a company called ECW, which is Extreme Championship Wrestling, and they had a match called The Fans Bring the Weapons, and they would like turn up with like Nintendos and like cast iron pots and stuff for wrestlers to use on each other. So you can there's still companies out there like CZW who do like the ultra extreme sort of hardcore matches, and this was the match which I actually heard about Arquette participating in, and the fact that he got his throat slit by a light tube tray, and there's hearing him talk, there was a moment where it became very real to him, and you see this in the actual match itself, but it's absolutely shocking to watch, and even worse, the TV 90s heartthrob Luke Perry's there too, as his best friend as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the toughest scene to watch in the entire documentary. I mean, already I'm not a big fan of wrestling because of just how extreme things get in a normal match, and how rough it is. But watching this is a completely different thing. Like, I never knew death matches existed, and just you're seeing these people. They're like hitting him with it's just like relentless. Like with light tubes and all that stuff, and then the moment he starts carving him with the light, it's just so extreme, and you think about it and you're like, is that supposed to be normal, or is that guy just kind of like crazy? Like he's like a little unhinged there, where he's taking this way overboard because of all the encouragement that from the people, from the audience, right? He's getting all this encouragement from the audience, and I'm wondering if this is staged or if this is actually happening. Like, where this is like, obviously this is happening, but is this actually staged, right? Or is this something that he decided because of that he would do this? Because obviously it got out of hand, right? I mean, I don't expect that they had expected to slit his throat open, because that would be... Yeah.
That would be rather extreme if Nick Cage set out to intentionally kill David Arquette. No, I mean, with whenever you have like hardcore wrestling and there's certain matches which have more of a free form flow to them, other matches are more sort of planned out, and within wrestling there's many different sort of styles of wrestling that you can do. I mean, it's not all like this super extreme wrestling that we see here. You have, like I said, you have just more mats or based wrestling, you can have technical wrestling, you can have luchador wrestling, which is more like high flying and colorful costumes. There's many different sort of wrestling. I think that's what we see glimpses of throughout. It's just this happened to be such a standout match that they kind of had to show it in its bloody entirety. But
if you think about it though, I think that the documentary itself is something of a personal journey for David Arquette, when we see him kind of get back from his low point and kind of find himself again. But at the same time, it's also kind of like wrestling 101. We kind of learn about wrestling along the way through the things that he's doing, and you kind of have an idea about whether, for people who are wanting to get into the business, is this something that you want to do? Because it really feels like there is no shortcut. You have to train hard. You need to train. You need to learn all the skills. You need to be able to find your own style and personality. And it's really, for a bunch of people who think Hollywood stars are not something that they respect to for winning the title, they're all kind of show businessmen,
Definitely so, and I mean, this is an absolute true warts and all documentary. There's nothing really sort of cut out. There's no attempts to sort of like for Arquette to show himself in the best light, as he shows himself in the worst light possible at any given time. And as I said, you see him like go from being this overweight drunk to basically just becoming absolutely jacked and a proper legit athlete, which is just fascinating to see. And I mean, wrestling, like any sort of business, I mean, there's going to be people who never make it to the top and just make a living just wrestling these like little indie federations and stuff. And the fact that Arquette truly does have this love for the business, I mean, there's never any sort of like looking down and going, oh well, this is just some like minor federation. He's just like, he loves it all. from like right from the backyard guys all the way to the top. And even when he finds out he's wrestling in some guy's backyard, he's sort of like, oh, there's just some like kids being silly, and it's like, I like being silly. I think he probably changed his mind after he's been busted open by these kids, but you know, it's as I say, I just find it really, just a really gripping and engrossing sort of ride, and it made me wonder, I mean, whether he's still actually pursuing this or not, because there's nothing on his Wikipedia page to say that he's still out there wrestling at the moment, whether this was just sort of like an odyssey that he sort of went on to see if he could do it or what. But
I mean, judging from I don't know, like I said, I don't know, I mean, because I don't remember it clearly, but the last final closing thing that he said at the end of the documentary after all the credits went through, I don't know if you watched it, but
yeah.
But it didn't really feel like he pursued it. I think he pretty much made the point that he's not going to be like a professional wrestler.
Yeah.
From what I understand. But so I mean, it definitely, I think it definitely brings your attention back to David Arquette a little, though, for anybody who's watching this, because you kind of, I mean, I hate to say this, but I kind of forgot about David Arquette.
Easy to do.
Because, to be fair, I haven't watched a whole lot of David Arquette. I mean, I remember him from Scream, obviously, but I think he was in Bone Tomahawk, which is probably the more recent movie that I saw of him. I believe he was. I think I remember. Because there was a recent movie I saw him in, and I was like, hey, that's David Arquette. I haven't seen him in a while, you know?
I know he's going to be in Scream 5.
Well, I mean, Scream is like his thing at this point.
You Cannot Kill David Arquette is available to stream now from all your usual streaming sources, and one that I think is definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it already. And if you obviously want to see learn more about wrestling, Vice put out a really great series called The Wrestlers, which looks at the many different aspects of professional wrestling. They also have another great show called Dark Side of the Ring, which is about some of the darker moments in professional wrestling as well, such as like the Montreal Screwjob, the wrestler New Jack, and the death of Owen Hart. Which should be noted. I mean, this is something also that should be noted, but we're obviously wrapping this up now. But for David Arquette's WCW run, he didn't take any payments at all. He donated all the money to Droz and the Owen Hart's family, which he didn't actually make a big deal of saying that he did it. He just did that just as a wrestling fan. These two people who were Owen Hart obviously killed during a rigging accident, which caused him to fall 20 feet into the ring and die, and Droz obviously left her paraplegic after a botched wrestling move. And I mean, this is the thing when you talk about wrestling and it's like, oh, wrestling's fake and whatnot. I mean, these are, at any particular moment something could go wrong and you could end up like a paraplegic. I mean, you see some of these older guys and they're just basically, their bones have been like destroyed from like falling on their backs and whatnot, so they're walking with like canes and stuff. And it's just there's a lot of respect that I think some of these people, the wrestlers, don't deserve, and I think this is what I think Arquette sets out to show as well as his journey here. But I think it's definitely a documentary worth checking out. I don't know about yourself, Kim.
Yeah, absolutely. I think respect is one of the key words here. Because, like, for me, I mean, I'm not going to go out and watch any wrestling matches right now, but, I mean, I have definite respect for the sport more than I had before. Just the journey of it. Like, you can call it a show, and we've been saying, like, I didn't realize it was all kind of set up to, it's a predetermined, pretty much, like you said. And what really... But the thing is that what might be predetermined, and they have a certain set of motions they need to go through. But there's a lot of room in the middle for them to kind of do their own thing and sort of... So a lot of accidents can still happen because it's not like you have a stuntsman like when you're doing a movie. These are all moves they're doing by themselves. So they have to have this physical ability to do it. And that's where the risk comes in, because whether you use weapons or whether you do whatever, I mean, or jumping off of the ring or something, all those things, are pretty dangerous. You do something wrong, and then it's like, that's it. Your spine gets twisted or something, and then that's like, bye-bye, So this is wrestling in the end it is a really, really dangerous sport, and the respect is for the people who train for it, and I think that's why I think you kind of see a better picture of why people were so angry with him winning it in the 20 years ago, in the sense that he didn't do anything to deserve it, whereas these other wrestlers are risking their lives every single day to train for this title, for the fame in this profession. And he just comes in and kind of swoops it up, So so it's not completely unjustified, because while he's showing the steps of being a professional wrestler, it also shows a lot of how much respect is for every single element of it, and how important it is that just him showing his love and respect for the sport at the same time as letting other people see that this is a sport that's not just, that's just not some kind of entertainment, and you should really appreciate it for more than what it is, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic. But yeah, definitely go check it out if you haven't already. And I think a hearty thumbs up from us both, I believe, so.
Yeah.
But thank you as always for listening. If you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button wherever you happen to be listening to us. And you can also follow us on both on Facebook and Instagram. And you can check out our full archive episodes at moviesandtpodcast.wordpress.com. You can check out our current season, which is on David Fincher, as well as our previous seasons on the likes of Paul W. Sanderson, Guillermo del Toro, Sofia Coppola, and Ang Lee. As well as that, you can also check out our fun bits of writing, as well as our Friday Film Club, where each Friday myself and Kim both pick a film to put together into a fun double feature. Sometimes it's a theme, sometimes it's not. Either way, it's a chance for us to explore the movies that we feel that you should be checking out. But until then, thank you again for listening, and we will be back soon. Until then, good night.